Every year, thousands of workers clock in for a shift they never clock out from. The fryers are hot, the floors are wet, and somewhere a safety warning is being ignored. So here's the question you need answered before your next meal. How many people have died inside the places that serve you every single day? He was 17 years old. His name was Marcus. He had just finished his first week at a Burger King franchise in rural Georgia, and he was already thinking about what he would do with his first paycheck. His manager handed him a mop bucket and pointed him toward the grease trap. No gloves, no protective gear, no explanation of how the drainage system worked or what happened when the pressure built up inside it. Just a nod and the words, "Clean it out." Marcus got down on his knees and started working. The grease trap was ancient and running far hotter than it should have been, and the release valve had been jammed for weeks. 3 other workers had reported it. Nothing was done. When the pressure finally gave way, scalding grease erupted outward with enough force to cover Marcus from the chest up. His screams brought 2 coworkers running, but the damage was already done. He was airlifted to a burns unit 40 minutes away. He died 2 days later. He had never even received his first paycheck. OSHA investigators arrived and found the grease trap had been flagged in a prior inspection. The franchise owner had signed off on repairs that were never made. The fine issued was $62,000. The franchise stayed open. Marcus's mother sat in a courtroom and listened to lawyers argue about liability, while her son's work uniform sat folded on his bed at home. No criminal charges were filed. The owner sold the franchise 8 months later and opened a new one across the county line. The walk-in freezer at the Burger King on the outskirts of Memphis had a broken door latch. Everyone who worked the closing shift knew about it. They had known for 3 months. A handwritten note had been taped to the inside of the door by a worker named Darnell, a 26-year-old father of 2, who had nearly been trapped inside twice before. The note said simply, "Do not let this door close all the way." On the night of February 11th, 2019, Darnell was doing a stock check alone near the end of his shift. The door swung shut behind him. The latch caught. He banged on the door for what investigators later estimated was close to 40 minutes before the cold took hold of him. His coworkers assumed he had left early. The manager locked up and went home. Darnell was found the next morning when the opening crew arrived. He was in the corner of the freezer, curled against the shelving. The temperature inside had dropped to negative 18 degrees Celsius overnight. The broken latch had been reported in writing to the franchise owner on 3 separate occasions. Each report was ignored. The fine handed down after his death was $44,000. The franchise owner released a statement expressing condolences. Darnell's 2 children were 4 and 6 years old at the time of his death. Carlos was a maintenance contractor, 31 years old, hired by a Burger King franchise in South Texas to fix a rooftop exhaust unit that had been rattling for weeks. He was not given a harness. He was not given guardrails. He was given a ladder and told to get it done before the lunchtime rush. The roof had not been inspected in over 2 years. A section near the exhaust unit had been weakened by water damage, the surface soft and unstable beneath a layer of tar. Carlos reached the unit, knelt down to examine the fitting, and the roof gave way beneath him. He fell through the ceiling of the kitchen below a drop of roughly 4 meters, landing on the prep counter. Workers in the kitchen at the time described the sound as something they would never forget. Carlos survived the fall itself, but sustained a severe spinal injury and a traumatic head injury. He died in hospital 11 days later. The investigation found that the franchise owner had specifically chosen Carlos's contracting company because they had offered the lowest quote and had not asked about safety equipment. The liability was split between the franchise and the contracting firm. Both denied primary responsibility. Carlos's wife was pregnant with their second child at the time of the accident. The lunch rush at a Burger King franchise in central Ohio was already running hot on the afternoon of July 8th, 2021. The fryers were at full capacity, the kitchen was understaffed by 2 people, and the exhaust system above the cooking line had been making a grinding noise for days. At 12:47 in the afternoon, a grease fire ignited above the primary fryer. It should have been stopped immediately. While the fire suppression system above the cooking line had not been serviced in 4 years, when it activated, it released only a fraction of the suppressant needed. The fire spread to the wall paneling within 90 seconds. Workers near the front of the kitchen ran for the main exit. A worker named Priya, 22 years old and 8 months into her job, ran for the rear exit. It was padlocked from the outside, a fire code violation that had been documented in a council inspection 14 months earlier and never corrected. Priya died of smoke inhalation. She was found 3 feet from the door. The franchise owner was charged with criminal negligence. The location was permanently closed. The suppression system service records were later found to have been falsified on 2 consecutive annual reports. Priya had been saving money to send her younger brother to college. Jerome was a delivery driver, 38 years old, picking up a bulk order from the rear entrance of a Burger King franchise in Philadelphia on a wet Tuesday morning in March 2020. The back stairwell leading from the delivery area to the loading bay had a broken railing on the left side. The stairwell floor was wet from an overnight leak in the ceiling above. There was no wet floor sign. There was no warning of any kind. Jerome slipped on the 3rd step from the top and fell the full length of the stairwell, striking his head on the concrete floor at the bottom. He was found by a kitchen worker 20 minutes later. Jerome was taken to hospital and placed in intensive care. He died 46 hours later from a bleed on the brain. The broken railing had generated 2 prior OSHA citations against the franchise, both of which had been acknowledged and signed by the owner. Neither had been actioned. Because Jerome was employed by a third-party logistics company and not directly by Burger King, corporate distanced itself entirely from the case. The franchise owner settled with Jerome's family out of court under a confidentiality agreement. The amount was never disclosed. Jerome had 3 children. The stairwell railing was replaced the week after his death. It was his first day. His name was Tyler, 19 years old, hired at a Burger King franchise in northern Florida on a Monday morning in August 2022. The shift manager who was supposed to train him was already running a kitchen short by 1 person. Tyler was shown the equipment quickly. He walked through the stations in under 10 minutes and handed an apron. By midday, he was working the prep station alone. The industrial mixing unit at the prep counter had been modified the previous month. A safety guard that covered the intake mechanism had been removed by a maintenance worker to make the unit easier to clean. It had never been replaced. Nobody told Tyler the guard was missing. Nobody told him to keep his hands clear of the left side of the machine while it was running. At 12:34 in the afternoon, Tyler reached across the unit to grab a tray. His sleeve caught the intake mechanism. His arm was pulled in before he could react. Coworkers shut the machine down within seconds, but the damage was catastrophic. Tyler was rushed to hospital where surgeons worked for 6 hours. He lost the arm below the elbow. He survived. But the version of his life he had imagined on the drive to work that morning was gone. The safety guard had been removed 31 days before his first shift. The franchise was fined $88,000. The manager who removed the guard was not charged. 6 months later, investigators discovered the same modification had been made to a unit at a second franchise owned by the same operator in a different city. That unit was still running. 6 workers, 6 shifts that changed everything. A teenager who never got his first paycheck. A father who froze to death 40 feet from his co-workers. A contractor who fell through a roof nobody bothered to check. A young woman who died 3 feet from a door that should never have been locked. A delivery driver whose family signed away their right to speak about what happened. A 19-year-old who lost his arm on his first day because someone took a safety guard off a machine and walked away. In every single one of these cases, someone knew. Someone had been told. A report had been filed. A warning had been written. An inspection had been failed. And in every single case, the people who knew made a choice. They chose to do nothing. The fines that followed did not bring anyone back. The settlements came with silence attached. The franchises reopened or were quietly sold. And tomorrow morning, somewhere, another worker will clock in for a shift, reach for a piece of equipment they were never properly trained on, and trust that the people above them did their job. The only question left is whether that trust is earned.